here's our static HTML. This is what we want it to look like more or less when it's finished. This is our UI. So what potential components do you see here? If we were going to chop this up into pieces, let's just say chop it up into a series of rectangles that might make good separate components. What are some possible components we might have here? All the stuff on the right, the form, right? Yeah, that seems like it could be a separate component. So everything from like that light gray line over to the right seems like a component, yeah. The list of notes seems good. So we've got that, we've got the list of notes. Yeah. Little buttons on the side. So sidebar or something. So we've got the little thin strip of sidebar, we've got the list of notes, we've got the form that you actually enter the note in, and that covers it. Now we could break those down into even more subcomponents, like inside the list, each note in the list could be a separate component. But we'll start with those big three. And remember I showed you there's a sign-in page too, right? So ultimately there's going to be this, and then there's going to be the sign-in page. So I'm going to call all of this together main, and then we're going to break up main into those three things. So let's go ahead and start making our first component from scratch. And I'm going to call it main. So in your source directory, that's where all our JavaScript lives. Make a new file, and we're going to call it capital M main.js. So name your files exactly what you name your components, capital letters and all. It's not going to break if you don't. It's just going to be hard to remember the inconsistency if you don't. So here's our file. Let's make a component. Let's make it about as simple as we can. We need to import React from lowercase r React. We need to make a class called capital M main that extends React.component. Now before I even put anything in there, I'm going to go ahead and go to the bottom and say export default main because I'll forget otherwise. Kind of like putting that trailing comma. I just always do this before I even go any further. So now we've got a default export from this file, which means we can import it somewhere else. Now what does every component need? A render function. You must have a render function. You don't have to have any state or any props, but you must have a render function. Render method. And it's going to return some JSX. Generally put it on multiple lines, so I just always put my parentheses there. And to keep it about as simple as it could possibly be, I'm just going to put a div in there. I'm going to put a div with a class of capital M main. And check this out. Emmet, the little thing that expands selectors into elements, even works with JSX. Dot, capital M main, hit my expand abbreviation shortcut. There we go. It's even smart enough to do class name. For mine, it's control spacebar if you configured it that way. It's probably tab otherwise. But this might not work out of the box. You might have to do a little configuration on the website for the class, on the page for tools, VS Code key bindings. If you scroll down far enough, there's a section on Emmet. I went too far. And it's going to show you that you need to actually change a little something in your VS Code settings so that it will do JSX. Just do that in your own time and you'll get those shortcuts and it'll save you a lot of trouble. So I'm going to put that div in there and then I'm just going to put the word main, just something in there so that I can tell that it worked. That's about as simple as components get. Must have a render function that returns some JSX. Must return a React element. No, we could have used React.createElement because that's really what's happening here. Then, back in app, we're going to import that. Actually, put it on the page. So in app.js, we have the word note header here. Instead of that, let's go ahead and put in our main component. So first, we must import it. The way I organize my imports, I put everything that's imported from a node module first. Then I usually put a blank line, and then all the ones that are imported from my own files. I usually do my CSS first and my actual components last. So I'm going to do it like this. And say import capital M main from the string and then the path to that file. And I have a Visual Studio Code extension that actually does path auto completion here. So I can actually just pick it from this list here once I hit /main. And you don't need to put .js. For JavaScript imports, it just assumes it's a JS file. So import main from main. It's already complaining that I'm not using it yet. Give me a second. So how do we use it? JSX. Let's just take note header out here. Let's put in a tag. I could do it like this with an opening and closing tag. But since there's nothing in there, I can just make a self-closing tag like this. Generally put a space between the element name and the close. Not a rule, but a convention. So what that's going to do is right there, it's going to just render that component. And since our development server is doing all this for us, it's refreshing our page for us, we should see this. You should see main on the page. Doesn't look like much, but by golly, we added a component and we got it to render. So go us. We've taken our first step into a larger world. Add main component.